It is hard to believe that a country that was an economic leader in Europe and in the world in some respects is now fighting for its economic life. Germany is not only dealing with an economic crisis, but its fragile coalition government has fallen apart. It's also dealing with an aging population crisis, and at the same time, it is also dealing with the shortage of labor. So many factors involved here. That's what we're going to take a look at when it comes to Germany's economic crisis. Some of the highlights. The economic slowdown in Germany, recession fears are in place. Pivotal EU role that it plays, well, it could drag down the entire EU as a result. Only time will tell whether that is going to happen or not. By some accounts, it may have already. Now, Germany's weak growth is another highlight. The 2024 GDP growth below 1%, and in 2025 predicted to only grow by 1%. The car industry and sector is hardest hit. 30% of the total economy is a contribution of Germany's car industry. That's a big portion of its economy. And the root causes is obviously what we will focus in and zoom in on, which is traced to the automotive sector and the manufacturing sector. It is struggling to embrace newer technologies, and government investment has been blocked. Germany's economy, once the leader in Europe, is in crisis mode. The country is facing a second year of zero growth. As if that is not bad enough, Germans are preparing for a snap election since the fragile government coalition collapsed, adding more to German woes. Germans are sick and tired of their economic pain and will look to choose a government that would revive the country's economy. This is no easy task, given that energy prices are high and companies are cutting jobs. Germany, Europe's largest economy, has not seen significant growth in the past 2 years. The economy recorded a 0.1% growth from July to September, but it is forecast to contract over the entire year. And economists do not expect to see a return to growth in 2025 unless the new government can make significant changes quickly. Layoffs have come from its major sector, the auto industry, like VW, to Bosch, Germany's largest auto supplier. Bosch announced it had planned to cut 5,500 jobs beginning in 2027. More than two-thirds will be at German factories. Time to take a look at some social media posts. First up, German economy is suffering from the worst lack of orders since the global financial crisis back in 2009. The IFO Institute has stated that expensive energy created expensive products. The expensive products are losing against the completion on the world markets. Next, God's divine justice. That's what happens when you fund and support a genocide in Gaza. We figured to put that in there since that's what many are thinking about Germany. Next, there's a video. A career in Germany is not as rosy as it sounds, with the GDP shrinking by 0.2%, high input costs in core sectors, mass layoffs, and economic slowdown. Both locals and expats are feeling the heat.
One of the funniest rejections that came across me and many others that I know is that you are overqualified for the job.
Even when we complete the studies, getting a job as per our qualifications and as per our background is highly challenging.
Immigrants or non-immigrants, people are losing their jobs. The companies are cutting down the position.
Then Germany's economy has been skirting a recession for most of the past year, as weak export demand, surging energy costs, and rising wages are compressing corporate margins, pushing the country's vast industrial sector deep into a recession. And finally, this post says Germany is in a recession. The economy contracted by 0.3% in Q1, following a 0.5% contraction in the fourth quarter of last year. Plus, they're dealing with high inflation at 7.2% in April, and unemployment, meanwhile, to have increased to 5.6%. This is what stagflation looks like. Let me introduce our guest for the first segment of the Q&A. Joining us is Axel Dreher. He's an economist and professor of international and development politics at Heidelberg University over in Germany. Axel Dreher, welcome to Economic Divide.
And thank you for having me on the show.
Let's take a look at Germany's economy, trying to figure out what's going on here. I mean, you have a recession that occurred 2 consecutive quarters. You have also political uncertainty with the breakdown of the somewhat weak coalition government. And then you have the description being given to Germany, which is pretty wild, and that is the sick man of Europe. Can you describe to us what's going on with Germany's economy?
Well, Germany has a couple of problems right now. Some are structural and some temporary. One of the structural ones is an aging population. So we have one of the oldest populations in the world. That puts pressure on the labor market and on social security systems. Another structural one is underinvestment. So there's long been a lack of investment in infrastructure and technology. That, of course, hampers productivity and economic growth. And there's a lot of debate about regulatory burden. So there's excessive red tape, regulations that make it difficult for business to operate efficiently. Then we have the energy transition, so the shift away from fossil fuels. It's only partly, but certainly substantially affected by the Russian gas cutoff. So that's a challenge and it's costly. And then there are global economic factors such as the uneven post-pandemic recovery in China, global supply chain disruptions and things that have impacted the export-driven economy in Germany. Then, as you have mentioned, there's political instability. So there's a government, or there used to be a government consisting of 3 parties that could hardly agree on doing anything together, and that has hindered decisive economic policy making.
All right, that sounds like a blow there to the whole government because of that not getting along, per se. All right, let's bring our next guest in. We have Radhika Desai joining us. Radhika Desai is professor in the Department of Political Studies and the director of the Geopolitical Economy Research Group at the University of Manitoba over in Canada. Radhika Desai, welcome to Economic Divide.
I'm Radhika Desai, and yes, thank you very much for having me on your show.
All right, the German economy is not doing well. It has experienced a recession. It has come out of that, but it is set to go back into it again. And you're also looking at this coalition government that has fallen apart. Why are we looking at an economic crisis of this magnitude in Germany?
Germany is being described as the sick man of Europe. That Germany is being described as the sick man of Europe is a big contrast to the past when Germany was regarded as the economic powerhouse of Europe. Germany is, as you say, going through a prolonged recession. And the key reasons that in the discussion in Germany, you will find that the mainstream German press will mention every reason they can think of, but the real reason. And the real reason is that it has essentially lost what the key lifeline that it relies on as a big industrial power, which is a big consumer of energy. It needs cheap energy, and cheap energy from Germany can only really come from Russia. And that is what Germany has lost as a result of its participation on American terms in the Ukrainian conflict. So this is what's happening. And of course, Germany may have some other problems, but because, for example, competition from China, but precisely because Germany has a government that is so intent on preserving the Atlantic relationship that it cannot at all think of the kind of industrial policy that would be needed if it were to rescue German industry. And to add to all of this, there is now the current coalition government has collapsed. It collapsed within a few hours of the election of Donald Trump. And it tells you the extent to which the German government was reliant on a Biden-Harris administration being in power in Washington. This being not the case, the German government has essentially had to give up and has decided to hold new elections.
Time now for the Infonews section of the program. First up, Ford and EU layoffs. That's right. The iconic U.S. car maker, as they call it, has axed 14% of its workforce in Europe. That amounts to about 4,000 employees. The reason given was weak EV or electronic vehicle sales and what they called economic headwinds. The job cuts represent about 14% of Ford's 28,000 workforce in Europe and around 2.3% of its total workforce of 174,000, and it's going to be completed by the end of 2027. Next up, Iran's mining sector is what we picked in terms of its exports, where the exports from this sector has exceeded $7.5 billion for the first 7 months of the Iranian calendar. Exports from the mining sector include metals and minerals, and it has increased by 2% in weight over the same period to reach nearly 36.6 million tons. And just a quick fact about Iran and its steel sector, it is one of the 10 largest in the world. The country has reported a steady increase in production and exports of steel in recent years. Then taking a look at Google in terms of the monopoly status or description that it has been given, and now it has to sell Chrome in order to end the search monopoly, and this is something that the U.S. prosecutors have dictated. The Department of Justice has said that Google has deprived rivals of opportunities to expand their search engine market share. And finally, the UK economy is what we took a look at for our last entry. The budget in that country is blamed for the first contraction in the private sector in a year. Fallen activity in November was pinned on the Chancellor's tax rises, as official figures also show a drop in the October retail sales. Finally, it says Labour's first budget in 14 years has been given the thumbs down by the private sector businesses, as it was blamed for the end to a 12-month run of expansion and a fall in retail sales. I stand corrected, we have another entry, and this one is about the French farmers. We figured it's important to have them included here. The strikes is what the topic is, where they have threatened chaos over the EU trade deal with South America's Mercosur. French farmers have stepped up their protest against a proposed trade pact between the European Union and the 4 South American countries, the Mercosur bloc of Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Now, this bloc would create the world's largest free trade zone, and therefore it shows how important of a trade zone that is. Well, those were the topics we picked for our Info News section. If you have any topics that you would like, wherever and whatever part of the world you're in, let us know. Contact information is coming up. It's time now for the in-depth section of the program. Germany's powerhouse status has now been reduced to being called the sick man of Europe. Now, this was surely not something that happened overnight, nor in many regards was it anticipated. But what are the reasons for this downfall? Let's take a look at some of the reasons, when put together, may explain why Germany is in the weak position that it is in now. Well, one of the reasons Germany is called the sixth man of Europe is due to per capita consumption that you see over here. Take a look at all these countries here, and now wait until we get to Germany. Look at that, almost 5%, if not a little bit more, in terms of the change per capita consumption. And again, based on the different countries that it's listed here, the Eurozone as a whole, you can see even there's not much growth. Germany, it ranks the lowest. So broadly speaking, it's not doing well, including the Eurozone as a whole. And the per capita consumption is barely above water when it comes to the EU, it being in the positive territory. Well, Germany is not only Europe's locomotive, it's also its best factory. That's how things were. This is the value added to manufacturing that Germany actually contributes when it comes to the EU economy as a whole. And as you can see over here, look at Germany's contribution, a little over $700 billion when it adds that to the value to the manufacturing, which leaves other countries far behind with its huge GDP and its economy focused on making things, basically. When it comes to the percentage, it accounts for 27% of all industrial production on the continent, which, put another way, Germany's economy is actually so big that one fall would actually drag the whole EU, the Eurozone, down with it. That's how big an economy Germany used to have. Now, let's take a look at this graph. This looks at the price of gas, which is already worth 10% of what it was at its peak back into the year 2023, and has practically fallen back to its pre-war levels. But despite this, German industrial production has actually failed to regain its previous footing. Germany is now purchasing liquefied gas from the US, which is much more expensive than the energy that it purchased from Russia. Well, the German economy is much more dependent on the car industry than its neighbors. But things are not going that well there either. Take a look at this graph. This puts China into the picture. The energy transition, along with the switch from combustion engine to the electric car, is one area Germany has not adapted itself. And of course, Chinese subsidies is another factor, including American tariffs. They have impacted this sector, and Germany has not been able to react to it. Now, taking into consideration all of that, then comes what's called Germany's debt brake. This debt brake actually propelled the collapse of the government. There were clashes within the former ruling coalition about economic and budget policy. The key factors there, however, culminated in what's called the debt brake, which is a fiscal rule that limits how much debt the government can take on. So that was another headache contributing to the economic downfall of Germany up to this point. Now, on the debt brake, well, it has resulted in a huge lack of investment. Germany has not been able to add enough to its capital stock. Here are some companies to put that into perspective. When you take a look at the amount of fixed capital that Germany has accumulated compared to the other countries here in this graph, like France, Italy, Spain, the United Kingdom, and the United States, you can see how Germany falls way short, the red being the net fixed capital formation. And it goes back to the year 1994 in this case. And then you have from the yellow one being from the year 2004 to 13, and the blue 2014 to 2023. And you can see that is how low that actually ranks. Basically, it means that the government did not approve any substantial loans to enter the sectors that are in need of it. And as a result, there's been poor performance in those sectors, like the auto sector. All right, let's bring back our guests and see what they think. We have Axel Dreher, who rejoins us. He is an economist. Axel Dreher, welcome back. Taking a look at Germany, considered once EU's powerhouse, driving the entire EU bloc's GDP growth at one point, but now it's not doing that. Obviously, it's in the opposite direction. One of the reasons has been cited is the high prices of energy. Do you think that this dependence on Russia for cheap energy, and now that it doesn't have that, is the main reason?
Well, it most likely is the main reason, but it certainly is not the only one. The Green Party was part of the government when Russia, or when we decided to reduce reliance on Russian oil and gas. And so there was an ongoing transition to renewable energy that was hardly delayed or hardly stopped at a time when doing so would probably have been advisable. So there was a closure of nuclear power plants that came at a time where many economists would have preferred to extend the use of nuclear powers for a while. So that led to increased reliance on more expensive energy sources. That certainly is part of the story. Related to this, the transition to renewable energy. So there's a shift that is meant to make Germany rely more on renewable energy for reasons of sustainability. But of course, initially, this comes with huge costs. So the infrastructure investments are high, like solar panels, heat pumps, and other stuff. So that makes current prices more expensive. And there's an increased demand with the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, so a larger demand for energy. That also puts upward pressure on prices. There are global supply chain issues, such as disruptions in the global supply chains, which have affected the availability and cost of energy resources. And then a point that I've mentioned above already, there are regulatory and bureaucratic delays in Germany. So bureaucratic processes are slow to adjust. And so the implementation of new energy projects is delayed, which reduces the necessary increase in supply.
Germany is already scrambling to see how it would deal with an incoming U.S. administration headed by Trump when it comes to the issue of tariffs. The vulnerability to a trade conflict could push the struggling economy into a recession. Germany's real GDP stagnated since the second half of 2021. It was poised for another year of slow growth next year, even before Trump won last month's U.S. presidential election. Economists now have lowered their output predictions even further. The U.S. accounted for 10% of German exports in 2023, its highest level in more than 2 decades. Since 2015, the U.S. replaced France as Germany's single most important trading partner and has continued to grow in importance as China dialed down its appetite for German products and sanctions hit sales to Russia. In short, Germany's economy is crashing for 3 main reasons: sky-high energy prices, reduced exports to China, and increased military expenditures.
Hello, and welcome to the Quick Tech section. I'm Kiarash Purnamati. When it comes to Germany's weak economic data, there are foreign hands at play here, like by the U.S. This was especially true during the time the now U.S. President-elect Donald Trump was in power. And with him coming back into the White House, Germany and the EU as a whole may see the continuation of the U.S.'s destructive policy. It was in 2016 when it came to light that the U.S. wanted to stop a coalition between Germany and Russia because the combination of German capital and technology along with Russian natural resources and manpower can counter American dominance. Given NATO's goal was to keep the Russians out, the US in, and the Germans down, US beefed up NATO and focused on establishing a buffer zone from the Baltics to the Black Sea in Central and Eastern Europe and separate Germany from Russia. This map shows how the US established this buffer zone, which was made from the Baltics to the Black Sea in Central and Eastern Europe and separate Germany from Russia. One of the other ways the US made moves to weaken the EU economy by targeting its powerhouse, the US was through using the energy card. That would mean directly focusing on establishing Russia as the enemy, which was done through the advancement of NATO. After Russia's military operation to Ukraine, the US had done enough scaremongering to have Germany submit to it. And that also meant turning to the US for its energy needs. The reason why energy is so expensive in Germany is that it had to switch from cheap Russian gas to costly liquefied natural gas bought from the US. German industry paid about 40% more for energy in 2023 than in 2021, before the energy crisis triggered by Russian special military operation of Ukraine. When electricity prices rise, production costs soar, along with inflation in virtually every sector, negatively affecting trade and investment across the economy. As a matter of fact, Europe's electricity has become so expensive that the threat of deindustrialization has prevailed in Europe in countries like the UK, Germany, France, Spain, and Italy. And that does it for this Quick Tech section. If you have any questions, please send them to the contact info, which will be coming up shortly. I'm Kiarash, and I'll see you next week.
We've tried very hard to take a look at why Germany is doing so poorly when it comes to its economy. There are many factors at play here, but it's very hard to really see how a country that contributed so much to the manufacturing process at a minimum of the EU is now just looking at maybe 1% growth, and before that to be in negative territory. At the heart of this matter, however, lies one key issue, and that is the price of energy. The cheap Russian gas is no longer in the picture, and the US has come in and is selling energy to the point that companies and manufacturing is doing poorly in Germany. At least that's one of the key reasons. That does it for this edition of the program. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, do send them to us. Contact information is behind me. From me, Kaveh Taqvi, and the team, it's goodbye until the next program.